Without both of their best players on Wednesday night against the Toronto Raptors, the San Antonio Spurs really struggled in this game against the Raptors, where they lost by 43 points. The Spurs were without Devin, Vassell, and Keldon Johnson. Like I mentioned earlier, their two best players, and so they really struggled after about 18 minutes of this ball game. So let's go ahead and dive right into this game. We're not going to go deep into stats on this review of this game because again it was the blowout pretty quickly after midway through the second quarter. So where it was competitive was in the beginning. That Toronto came out really aggressive at first, especially defensively, and that was kind of the theme of the game, was them forcing the Spurs into turnovers and then going out on the other and getting fast break points, getting dunks. And so the Raptors opened up with a 9-0 run. They ended up going up by 11 in the first 6 minutes of this game. The Spurs do battle back. And, by the end of the first quarter, it's a competitive game. The Raptors are only up by 1 point. The second quarter, the first 6 minutes are still competitive. The Spurs are only down by 5 points. And then the Raptors just go on a run there in those final 6 minutes of the second quarter. When halftime comes, the Spurs find themselves down by 15. And then the second half was just, all Toronto. The Raptors, built a 28-point lead, then a 34, then a 41. And then they actually got their lead all the way up to 48 points. But then, when the final buzzer rang, it was 43 points. So yeah, I mean, again, we're not going to go deep into analytics for this one because it was just a blowout. This is a tough matchup for the Spurs with, a really aggressive defensive team in Toronto, and then San Antonio missing, their two, go-to players on offense in Keldon Johnson and Devin Vassell, who were out with injuries. Leading scorers, I'll just go through the Spurs' three leading scorers because again, it was a blowout. Yeah, Bates-Diop had 17 to lead the team. He started with a lot of players out. Malachi Branham off the bench with 13, and then Josh Richardson was back with 10 points. The Raptors had multiple scorers score in double figures there, as you can see, players starting and off the bench. Toronto just had a really good night on offense. They won every scoring area of the floor except the three-point line, which is where the Spurs tied with them. But again, it wasn't enough for San Antonio. They ended up losing by 43. These are just the box score stats. One of the key things that you do want to look at in this part is the turnovers. The Spurs had a season high 23 turnovers, which is why Toronto was able to get out on the fast break and really just blow the sleet open. So that's kind of the stats there. But again, the Spurs really struggled in this game. Shot locations, let's not go too detailed in here. Toronto had a really good night on offense, especially there in the paint. 58% of their shots came from the paint. They made 62% of them. On the opposite end, the Spurs had a tough night on offense, basically shooting inside, shooting outside. It was a tough night for San Antonio. One thing that they're going to watch is that transition defense, which was 41 points for the Raptors. And again, it's because the Raptors are just forcing San Antonio into those turnovers. So, kind of expected there. All right, so now the Spurs, they get Thursday off, and then on Friday they're going to host the Los Angeles Clippers, and then on Saturday they go back on the road to face the Denver Nuggets. They have a back-to-back upcoming for this weekend to wrap up this week. And the key question is, how long are Devin and Keldon going to be out? Because as we saw, if the Spurs have one of those players available, like they got some wins with just Keldon, playing in these games, they're able to be competitive and they're able to get some wins. But if both players are out, your top two, creators on offense, that's a really tough time for San Antonio, as we saw in this first game against Toronto without Devin and Keldon. So again, we'll see if both players are back by Friday, or at least if one of those players is back by Friday. We'll see in the coming days as that game gets closer against the Clippers. So for Project Spurs, I am Paul Garcia.